what we decided to talk about today was really across the board, the different institutions up here, they have several different ways of sort of skinning this cat. So the idea behind this topic was, as you're getting into web streaming, as you're getting into whether you're providing something to your official website, or if you're doing something for ESPN3, or if you're doing something for another network, as you're doing that and you also have a video board production going on, you basically have two productions going on at the same time. So when you've got the control room, do you have two control rooms? Do you have one control room? Are you feeding different content to online into the video board, or are you doing the same content? All those different things come into play as you try to figure out how you're going to manage these dual productions. So what we've done is we've sort of figured out how we each accomplish this, and then we want to sort of talk about it at three different levels. The first level, and we don't want to disparage any of the three levels, for lack of a better term, but we sort of have a not optimal, somewhere in the middle, and what we would consider an optimal level. But I really want to start with Andy, not because it's not optimal, but it is a very unique situation that he has figured out how to do this at Georgia Tech, and we want to talk a little bit about that first.
Well, at Georgia Tech, we have a very unique perspective on how we do the dual production. We feed the video board, we feed primarily our second stream would be ESPN3 productions. So we don't have the luxury of having multiple control rooms, so we have to utilize our one single control room to accomplish both productions at the same time. So what that has done to us is we're tasked with taking one director, technical director, which is one body. He's calling his own shots, and he's utilizing one switcher, switching the video board show on the top ME and switching the ESPN show on the bottom ME. So the goal there is to make sure that no one in the venue on the big board is seeing any of the ESPN elements, so they feel like the show is custom to them, and then the ESPN show to the audience on ESPN sees a regular ESPN show. So, opportunely, we want to make sure that Kiss Cam doesn't show up on ESPN and vice versa. It doesn't always work because, when you're going to break and you're trying to do a rollout and you've got a shot of an old couple not kissing each other, there are challenges there, and the TD has to separate his two lobes to make sure that they remain independent. So I know most schools, as I found out, I thought everybody did it that way, but other folks are, adding extra cameras to their production. We still only use 4 cameras. We have some lockdown shots to help us kind of, pad this while we're concentrating on the other. We have some filler elements like our social media feeds that we put up on the video board, or a game tracker that shows in-game stats. So that way it allows us to break away for a moment and concentrate on the second show. So that's pretty much how we do it.
So our first level there is one person on one switcher, TD, in 2 different shows. Obviously, it takes a special talent to do that. It takes a lot of coordination, and I think you do it all off of one line of comm.
Yep, we have one clear comm, and marketing, promotions, cameras. Our talent has, an IFB, obviously, but for the most part, everybody is on the same channel, and they're hearing all the discussion.
So we've sort of put that here as our first sort of scenario as a way to accomplish this. Again, there's a lot of planning that goes into that. There's a lot of thought process that goes into that, and it takes a skill level to get it done. But that's sort of our first level. And then sort of the medium level, if you want Chad at Duke, if you want to talk a little bit about sort of where we are in the medium.
Yeah, so I have a couple of sports where we just don't have the budget to crew 2 different shows. And so what I will do for some lacrosse, volleyball, soccer, for our video board show is when a TV truck rolls up, or when we are doing the ESPN3 show, we provide a clean feed of the ESPN show to our video board. And I have a person sitting at the show control, and he's basically has a monitor there that he can watch and see when we're going to a Duke replay, or something that's pertinent to put on the video board at that time. And so we're using the clean feed from the ESPN3 show, or when a TV truck rolls in and they're good enough to give us that clean feed. So it doesn't look like an ESPN show, But we won't show if a visiting team scores, we're not going to put that on the video board, but it'll be a Duke-centric. We'll put replays up of Duke goals or, good things happen to Duke, or if they go to a crowd shot of Duke. They have no comm with the truck at all. They're just sitting there watching, and then they're also putting up their pre-produced stuff that we have preloaded into the show control. One other way we do it is for women's basketball. We do have 2 control rooms, but they share cameras. So it's, we have a couple different ways of skinning the cat there, but for women's basketball, we have our normal ESPN3 production, and then we will give the in-house show all of the cameras for replay, and then give him 2 handhelds to basically get his fan shots and all of this promotion, the promotion shots in that he needs, and then he has all of our ESPN3 feed, all of our raw camera feeds for replay or anything else he needs.
Dennis, you want to take a little bit on that?
Yeah, at Wyoming we do something pretty similar. We use the same feed for both our web stream and our video board. Our show controller, if you will, has all our marketing elements on it, our video, our intro video, all the ads, any pre-produced features we've done. We can run the frames for Kiss Cam or Muscle Cam or whatever you will through the show controller. So really, they're more in control of the show than we are down in the room of the video board show, and we're kind of just running the web stream down, and they go to it. And if they need something, if there's a promotion on the court, they'll let us know, and we'll shoot it for them while we're in a commercial break. And our marketing guys are great in terms of we let them know when we're going into commercial, and as soon as we're into a commercial, they'll start their promotion, and then I let them know, okay, 45 seconds, 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and then they're out of their promo before we come back on the air.
And that's sort of that hybrid mode right there is, I think, probably where a lot of people are at Clemson. So what we do, we actually have 2 control rooms, and we do share some resources, but we try to separate everything out for a video board show that actually has sold content. If we get into a arena that does not have any sold content by our marketing sponsors, then we're just taking a event and putting it up there. We're producing the ESPN3 event, and then it's a byproduct that goes up to the screen. But when we actually are in an arena that has sold content, then it's optimal for us to try to split that out. So we actually have 2 complete control rooms, 2 comm systems. So we separate those 2 out. The resources that we share are cameras, and that's where we get a lot of crossover. And the ability to take from one and use it the other is that we can set out our allotment of cameras for our ESPN show, and then we can patch those into the control room. But then we also give our in-house venue, we give that video board, we give it its own cameras as well. Sometimes it's one, sometimes it's several, but they at least do have something that is just for them that operator in that control room can call, so it can get all of your shots that you need in game. The one thing I don't want to do is I don't want to put something on the board that I don't control. I don't want to put anything live on the board that I don't control. So if it's a basketball, camera 1 up high, I need a camera 1 up high for that in-house show, and I need a camera 1 up high for that ESPN3 show. So I want to have dual cameras up high, but then I also need a camera somewhere for our marketing, which is usually going to be a wireless or something on the shoulder that can move around. So you're going to have at least 2 cameras for that in-house show, but then they're getting the benefit of the ESPN3 show by just watching all that into the replay deck as well. We sort of, that's sort of inching up to the optimal, where the optimal is obviously 2 complete control rooms, 2 complete setups that are independent of each other. I don't really know how many people have gotten there yet. That's sort of why we have some of the folks on the panel from our sponsors that can help us install these and help us price these out. But when you get into the optimal that we sort of defined it is 2 complete control rooms, and they are separate. You've got 2 comms. You're not listening to everybody on one party. Marketing is working on the in-house side. You've got all your people on the ESPN3 side or your web production side that is working on this set of comm. You've got 2 sets of audio boards. You have 2 sets of camera guys. That's where we sort of talked about the optimal. And one of the things that we realize is that there's totally different budgets in this entire room. So sort of one of these, all of these are a necessity based off of budget. If we all had the unlimited budget, we'd all take the optimal and we'd call it a day, and that'd be the way to do it. But we realize that there are different ways, and Andy has come across a great way to get his shows done based off of what he has, his space, his budget, the limited ability to bring people in. So like to bring in our Jeff and Josh a little bit to talk about just what some of this might cost, space requirements, and a little bit of that. Sort of talking in the middle scenario, and then maybe going up a little bit towards optimal.
Sure. So I think the first thing that we always step back and when we approach facility design with clients is there's a budget, and then it's who are your partners, right? So if you're on an E3 platform, obviously they have minimum specifications that you have to take into account and that you have to plan for just to be on the network. And then you have space considerations, budgetary considerations, everything else. But what we always come back to with customers is infrastructure. So infrastructure is always the most important thing. So if you have a budget to be in a situation, again, I feel like we're kind of piling on Andy like he's somehow doing something wrong. But you know, if you have a
actually, he's doing probably the best with the most of any of us in here.
Exactly. You know, if you have a situation where you have to share some resources from day one, we always want to plan with customers to be able to easily expand later and avoid what we call forklift upgrades, where you buy something today and then 2 years later you decide that you have some additional budget money. We come in with a forklift and take all that stuff out and drop in a whole bunch of new stuff. I think a good example of that, where they started out sort of in the medium and then have moved beyond that, is the University of Nebraska. Way back in 2009, they were one of the first major programs to do a major big HD production facility. And now, at that time, there was no ESPN3, there was really not streaming was point a single camera and just kind of put it out there on the internet and see who watched soccer. And there wasn't Big Ten Network and a bunch of other things going on. And so we could have never imagined any of that. But at that time, we always sort of understood that there was probably going to be something more. So we maximized their budget over time by planning fiber optic infrastructure and router core and patch core so that it could be easily expanded. And so since 2009, we've easily been able to integrate in 2 new facilities with sub-control rooms, a secondary control room that does just a show for social media over their, not really social media, to their handheld app over their high-density Wi-Fi in 2 venues, a permanent sort of home for their Big Ten Network Student U productions, and we really haven't had to address any of that infrastructure stuff. Now, 6 years and about a half a dozen facilities later and a bunch of additions later, they're in a position where now they're at maximum capacity. But you know, a lot of times, I think administrators, when they look at the costs of this, step over dollars to pick up dimes in the beginning and really end up costing themselves a lot more in the long run. So I think the benefit that oftentimes we can bring to the table is helping plan and helping bring a bigger picture and a bigger vision to your administration and say, I know there's a little bit of additional incremental cost here up front, but ultimately down the road as things expand and change, I think we can save you a lot of money down the road.
Josh, how about a little bit about just how we go about integrating some of these? If we want to share some of these resources, sort of getting this middle ground as a thought process for building some of these control rooms, how do we integrate those?
It's 2 parts, right? I'll echo a little bit of Jeff. Infrastructure is the key to these to make sure that we're future-proofing to the best we can in the early stages. The other part is really working with you to understand your individual staffing ability, because that's going to define a lot of even as far as infrastructure is concerned. We can slow-mo think about CGs. There's all the workflow parts and the automation, and those parts become so key to what your staff level is and what your skill level is and available in the first season and the second season, and obviously as it grows with the program. So that's a lot of it too, is actually really spending the time to talk about your individual needs and workflow and what your staffing can take on even in that first year, second year, third year of the program, and then making the technology scale along with the infrastructure as you bring on new venues, bring on new capacity, bring on additional equipment. So that's a lot of it too, is talk about the infrastructure, and let's talk about the individual staffing ability within the facility to make sure that we scale the equipment to your staff and then make the system scalable to grow as additional venues, additional streaming shows, those kind of things come online.
So sort of back to the beginning of this, what the thought process of the whole discussion was, as all this is coming online, as this is coming down the pipe, whether you're at a large school or a small school, trying to get the administration to think about what all these things mean. So as you are seeing more online coming at you, as you see another video board coming at you in another arena, one that hasn't been, or you see a video board that's there and they want to enhance what they're doing there. They might go sell some content, or they want to do more than just have some click effects items up there. As you see these things come down the pipe, it's trying to figure out the best way to skin the cat of getting that content to all those places. And that's really, as we were thinking about ideas for the show, that's where I really came up with the concept, because there are a lot of people out here who are doing this, and there's a lot of people who are doing it in different ways. But that's what we wanted to get people to think about was, all right, we're putting up a video board here. Well, that's great. Administration or a coach, they put up this video board, but how are we going to get content to it? How are we going to do that? And
Yeah, I was going to say, on that line, if you're planning something, you got a new building, you have anything, I mean, one of the things we're looking at right now is building out 4 control rooms, 2 for be ready for an ESPN3 and 2 for video board shows, because we have a lot of layover with video board and ESPN3. But one of the things that I'm challenged with right now, and that everybody needs to think about, is if you have 2 shows going at one time, you have 2 crews. And while you might get that upfront cost of paying for the control rooms, while the optimal might be having 2 separate shows, you also have to pay for 2 different crews. And my administration, and a lot of administrations out here, will tell you that there are some sports that have the money we should pay for 2 different crews, and then there's other sports that they tell you have to get creative. So while optimal is probably the 2 different control rooms, 2 different crews, it's just not, you can't do it for every sport, and so you have to figure out kind of that hybrid method for different sports, and you have to make sure, while trying to get your administration to understand, all right, we got the money to build these different control rooms. Now we have to get them to understand, if we want to use, why aren't you using both control rooms? We don't have the money to budget for 2 different crews. So I'm getting, you have to do a hybrid model, and that's one of the things that you also have to work with your administration, is not just the upfront cost, but the year-to-year cost with budgets and crew.
And that's a really good point. And that's where we're trying to get everybody to start thinking about. It's something we're having to think about in the ACC, and we've seen folks in the SEC have to start thinking about in the past year, and obviously other conferences have already started to have to think about it. But that's where we want to give some ideas to take to the administration. When you hear this coming down the pipe, we want to give those ideas, just the thought process, because that's not the thought process of the administration. A lot of times it's, all right, we're putting a video board up here. That's great, and that's where their thought process ends. And that's where we want to really give some ideas to really get that thought process going. We did want to leave some time. We wanted to take some questions. We want to circle back around to some YouTube stuff we want to alert you to at some point. But we want to leave a couple minutes to ask some questions of us, if there are. If not, we got a couple more things to discuss. But yes, sir.
I know you guys have talked a little bit about single path and being able to split away pre-show, and microphone now. I didn't have one the other day. You guys have talked about single path and splitting out a pre-show or a web show versus a video board show. But what I haven't heard a lot of is, a video board show, and I'm not obviously not talking down anybody here if you don't know this. Video board show is often a lot more than just putting the video and the highlights up there. There's crowd responsive elements. And this is really for everybody. Are there any steps you guys have taken to maybe help enhance the fan experience side of things on the video board side, whether through equipment or staffing or anything that has been particularly successful for you?
Actually, I'll let these guys speak about it. From my standpoint, what we're talking about from the optimization of how we want to go about producing this, that really, to me, has been one of the benefits to the fan experience in the arena, is they are actually getting an enhanced broadcast. So we are putting, we're trying to put a lot of emphasis on this in-game broadcast. Our partners are having us put emphasis on that production is going out to all the eyeballs on the web, and we actually are really ramping up that in-game production. Communication with marketing has been huge with us, really, and I think Andy will talk a lot about the communication as well. That has to take place, especially in a hybrid type model. But understanding what marketing is really after, and then developing your show and your crew around that to fit what they really want. That's really where the benefit from us at Clemson has come, is that we are really looking at it as two different shows, so we're giving them a full show.
Well, I think part of that is an administration decision, right? Where your priorities lie from your sport administrators and your marketing staff and everyone else. I think if you sat in on the SEC panel yesterday, you heard a bunch of schools that spent $6 to $10 million all talking about how their video board shows were kind of in the tank because they're focusing so much on the streaming and broadcasting side and how they're trying to address that. I think a lot of those schools in that model have put an emphasis on the streaming and the broadcasting part of it. So it's really a decision that your administrators need to boil down from the top as to what the priority is going to be and where they want emphasis made.
Like at our case in Wyoming, you know, we renovated our basketball arena last summer, and we went from a video board that was 150 by 220 pixels to two gigantic 47-foot video boards in our basketball arena, and so that in itself was an enhancement to the crowd experience. But at the same time, our administration and the Mountain West is putting a very heavy emphasis on our web streaming. So we kind of had to figure out a way, okay, and that's kind of where we came up with the idea of putting all the marketing elements on the board controller. And then that way, our assistant director runs that, and then I'm in the room running the web stream. So there is one person with their full attention on each side during one of our basketball games.
Yeah, I think, you know, the reason the optimal is having two different control rooms is to be able to take care of both shows and give everybody what they need. But you know, to echo Jeff, it's all a budget thing, and if you can't do two control rooms, you have to, you know, as we all are, we're creative, and you know, as Andy said, and we all are, we're creative in how we do it, and you know, I've seen at Duke, and a lot of the feedback we get from our fans is they'd rather see stats and scores and everything else on the video board, which is something we can do easily with one person instead of getting a whole other crew together, you know. And if that's what they want, well, it's not, you know, let's give them what they want and not have to provide a whole other crew. If that, you know, if that's what they need and that's what they want, that's the feedback we're getting. That's what we're going to try to do.
I'd say one of the benefits to our arena when we built it 3 years ago is the addition of the extra screens, the LED, the fascia, the courtside signage, and we utilize a lot of that to engage fans, crowd prompts, stats, you know, things that we can put on those screens to maybe take some of the emphasis away from the big screen.
Right, and a lot of that work's done before the game,
right,
you know, during the week, so you can help yourself out.
Right.
I do think it's important to think about the replay aspect. If you're sitting at home and you're watching a network TV broadcast, you're expecting 2 or 3 angles of replay of a big play, of a controversial play. And that's one of the things we try to attempt to remember, is that we want you to come buy the ticket and sit in the seat. We don't want you sitting at home. So we're trying to give you as much of an experience in game as you would get at home. And to us, that's stats, because you can look those up online, or you can be pulling them off the TV as they're providing them to you. But it's also replays. So we are trying to give you several different angles of replays of the big plays, just because we think that is something that, I mean, you see eyes go. We think that's something that's important to them. And we get that feedback that it is. But after a big play, you see eyes going up there. You see it on the benches, you see it on the sides of the field, and you see it in the stands. And so we really are trying to put an emphasis. And that, to us, is having multiple camera angles coming into that replay system so that we can provide those out. That's not just one camera sitting up there. It's camera one high at a basketball game, just giving you in-game action. We really want to try to emphasize the replays.
And what used to be highly frowned upon is, you know, highlighting controversial replays as well, but now I think we've lessened the restrictions on why we show controversial replays to put butts in the seats, because I'm going to stay at home because you're not showing me what I want to see. So we've taken a different approach there too as well, to make sure that we show everything that they want to see.
A lot of things, you know, speaking of replay, what everybody in here, a lot of people in here are probably also taxed with when they have 2 shows is also, especially for like basketball, women's basketball, is a DV Sport replay. And, you know, the more angles you can provide, the better for that. And, you know, you don't want to be, you don't want to have 1 or 2 angles when you can, you know, if you're ESPN show or whatever, you can have 6 different angles. You can provide that as well. It makes that easier as well.
What other questions? Hey.
So this might be a question more for the systems integrators, because I know the schools, in terms of administration, struggle with convincing athletic departments to go and buy in with more than the minimum. How do you guys address that with the administration of, ESPN or another network lays out minimum requirements, but they may not get you to a full show, and they won't provide you with the ability to do a video board show on top of it. So how do you address those issues?
Before the integrators go, go ahead.
Yeah, I can say from my experience at Wyoming, our administration over the past 2 years since I started working there has been fantastic. And, the only thing they really ask of me is don't come to me with the entire package that you want to buy all at once. And I've kind of worked out a plan with them, and we're going to be in year 3 of what is probably a 4 or 5 year plan to upgrade everything. And so we kind of space it out over by a little bit year 1, a little more year 2, a little more year 3, and they've been pretty receptive to that. The fact that I haven't gone, hey, I need $3.5 million right now. So.
The one thing that ESPN is worried about is they're worried about their production as you're delivering to them, and that's again the thought process is don't let your administration forget about you also do have a video board, or you also do have 2 sports going on at the same time. One of them might be going to ESPN3 or to wherever your online content is going, but you still are providing in-game venue for these other 2 events that are going on. And I think the integrators can talk a little bit about how they've tackled some of that.
But I think on the, a lot of it is that it can be a very scary thing, right? So administrators and different people, they hear about, Texas A&M spent $11 million, or this school spent this amount of money. And even within the SEC, there's a wide disparity in terms of what people spent and what they're accomplishing. And at the end of the day, they're still getting out video board shows, and they're getting out their ESPN3 work, right? So there's schools in that conference that spent $10 million, and there are schools in that conference that spent $2.5 million. So they're still at the end of the day accomplishing the same thing. Maybe they just have to be a little bit more creative about the workflow and how they apply their dollars to get the most bang for the buck, right? Because budgets are very sensitive. I think, again, it all comes back to what is most important to you and what's most important to your administration, and helping them understand how there's a cost applied to those things. I think we see today more and more administrators are becoming more receptive to spending on this because they see the intangible ROI, either from viewership on online platforms or direct revenue that they get from sponsorship and different elements within an LED show. So it's no longer, I think, good enough for the fan either at home or in the arena to just put up some click effects graphics and not show replays, for example, for your LED show. I think more and more administrators are starting to get that. Similarly, it's no longer good enough when so many schools are on the E3 platform to just put up 2 cameras and some sort of a little scoring bug and do a baseball game. It just doesn't fly anymore with your fans and with your fan base. So I think that helps ease some of that, as long as you can come with creative ways and understand that you don't have to spend $5, $6, $8, $10 million to build a facility that's going to function for what you need to do.
For a scenario where you have basically one person switching a video board show and one person switching a stream, but you're both using the same cameras, how do you sort of figure out the conflict and who gets to direct the cameras? I know that's something we struggle with, is we've got 2 different people switching 2 different things and wanting 2 different things, basically.
It's easy. You put one person directing both.
That's what I want to do, and they told me no, so.
No.
It's a great question. Like I said before, we're not going to put anything on that we don't control. We're not going to put anything on live that we do not control. So if you do not have the ability to be able to have an extra camera for your in-game show, if your live production, if your web stream is your main production, what we've done, and that has been a scenario sometimes that we come across, what we've done is we've made some cameras primary to the show and some cameras secondary to the show. So we might have a camera 1 and a camera 2 at a basketball. I keep going back to basketball, but in that scenario, but we might make that camera 1 and camera 2, we might make one primary for the in-house show and one primary for the web show. Now, obviously, camera 2's responsibility when he's primary for another show, he might be more like a camera 1, and it's something you just have to decide, but we're not going to put something on that we don't have live control over. So if we give those allotments, those camera allotments, we give them different responsibilities sometimes than what they normally would if it's just a primary for that show. Where'd the microphone go? Anybody else?
There's a certain inevitability of using production automation for enhancing the production values, more for the on-air, but may have application for, for the scoreboards. What has been the experience of guys in assessing that opportunity?
We'll talk from an integration standpoint, or?
Yeah, so, we also do a lot of television news business in a different division of our company, right? And so that's heavily dominated by production automation today. I would say on the sports side, that's been very slow to adopt from what you would consider a traditional automation platform, simply because, sports is a live, flowing, ebb and flow type of event where your breaks, and there's a lot of elements to it that are very scripted, but how you get to those breaks in between are not necessarily very scripted at all, right? So it's a little bit different beast from that perspective. I think on both the ESPN shows and on the control room side, today there's more automation than ever before. So the way that Andy can pull off the things that he's pulling off is by using automation on a different level, on more of a device level, and how devices talk to one another without an overriding automation layer. So using your switcher to now control video display processors and to trigger your replay system and to trigger your clip system and to, with one button push, be able to, split things off to go a bunch of different places. It's much, much, much more automated and far more complex on the back end today than ever before, to allow it to be very much easier than ever before on the operator side. So it's more of a device level automation than an overarching automation layer like you would have in news.
It also takes a fair amount of coordination with the university staff as well as the board vendors as well, because they've been treated as islands in the past, and they're now beginning to merge a lot as far as which pieces are controlling which part of the game. You hear different approaches as far as DAC running interface versus someone controlling ribbon board versus it being automated through the switcher. So each school has its own workflow and its own needs too, but we're really seeing the need to blend those lines where they've been treated traditionally as two individual packages with their own staffing requirements, to try and make that more centralized as well, to A, efficiency in people, and B, just make that a better timed and overall presentation tightens up once we're able to use those automation elements for both the board presentation, ribbon boards, concourse signage, those kinds of things, as well as the actual board show itself.
And to the manufacturer's credit, it's really become more of a training issue for that stuff. It used to be, 5-6 years ago, when you were just building an HD room and you were selling production switcher training, for example, XYZ production switcher manufacturer would come in and do a week's worth of training TDs on, okay, you push this button and it does this, and here's how our keyer bank works, and here's how the transition bank works, and yada, yada, yada. And now today, because, students and everyone have become a lot more savvy and can pick things up pretty quickly, if we do a week worth of switcher training, it's usually a day or two on how to push buttons, and the other 3 or 4 days are, okay, let's sit down and program your show elements and program this switcher so that we are triggering all of the different things that we want to trigger. So to the manufacturer's credit, I think they've also gotten a lot better at bringing their staffs up to speed on how to do that training and how to provide that level of training. And then other partners like ESPN have done a very nice job of creating packages that take care of a lot of that stuff and already have that pre-coded in. So it's very much more complex than ever and very much easier than ever.
It can be your best friend, it can be your worst enemy. When it doesn't work, your replay wipe comes in and then your score bug disappears. So it takes a fine amount of fine tuning, and it's just like what everybody else has said prior to this panel is repetitions. You do it, you realize what works best, you tweak it for the next show, and you go again.
What other questions? Yes, sir.
Quick question or statement to me and fellow integrator with Josh and Jeff.
You had your time, Fred.
I did? All right. As an integrator and the design part of it, we try to maximize the minimum. And one of the things that we found as an integrator is if you're blending these control rooms, if you do have 2 control rooms, you really need to focus on I think, more, like Jeff was saying, more of the infrastructure, whether it's a routing topology, whether it's a KVM matrix topology. I mean, these are minimum costs, some of this is. Tally, matrix, all those things that you could really blend together. Because one of the things that we've noticed, especially with the multiple points of distribution now, is you may be web streaming a sport, but then that service provider, whether it's ESPN or Fox or whatever, they may want to grab that web stream and use that as a linear broadcast. So that web stream has to look like a broadcast component. So that's another thing we noticed was just a huge ramp up of graphics for that consideration, and also going into the video boards. We just noticed a lot more graphics are involved, which again, I guess that takes more personnel, more crew to get involved. But the biggest statement I just want to say is, if you're talking about multiple control rooms, really kind of maximize the minimum as far as the infrastructure.
And that comes from a lot of workflow conversation to really understand each school and how they're going to take that on. And that's the biggest thing, is hooking up the wires and making the camera hook up to the router and the switcher and the DAs, and that's wire, and that's pretty clear. It's really identifying that workflow that's going to meet the needs of your staff and your budget, and it's taking the time to ask a lot of questions from a systems integrator perspective to really understand what that is, so we build you the right solutions, the right KVM with the right access layers and logins and all the things that really make it work on game day. I always have the conversation with my clients. It's with the video, we know the camera signal is going to show up in the switcher for the first game. That's not going to determine whether or not we're successful. What's going to determine whether we're successful is whether there's an appreciable difference in the game product, in the automation, in the workflow, and all that comes from really doing those sessions that concentrate on your specific needs and what we want to accomplish. As Fred indicated, splitting control rooms, maximizing what we do have budget for, and really getting the most show production out of that investment, and not just really focusing on the cables and where people are going to sit. Let's talk about what the show's going to look like and whether we have the elements and the automation and the appropriate ties to the board manufacturers and all of those things to really give you the tools and not just the technology itself.
And don't forget about audio. Audio is a huge component. We run 3 different consoles, and certain mixes are feeding mixes, inputs from other consoles to keep everything, because we want to isolate our radio feed coming in, record that. We isolate just NAT sound coming in, we record that. We isolate the ESPN program feed coming in, isolate that, because you want to walk away with all of those individual assets. So when the rights holder says, did my ad run properly, you have to show them. You have to say, well, here's how it looked when it ran. And the audio has to be there as well. So that's another component that we spend a great deal amount of time trying to figure out the right workflow so that we have access to that.
I think the biggest key, truthfully, is after you get the training from the integrators or the manufacturer, from our side, is just be prepared. Sit down and know all the pre-production is huge, and knowing what your switcher does, knowing, set up all those automations, set up everything from both sides, from a video board side and your web stream side is, and I stress this to my guys every day, is don't sit down an hour before the show and think it's going to go smooth. It's not. And that's what I also try to stress in my administration with all these different video boards coming in and all the web streams that we're doing. It takes up a lot of the time during the day, a lot more time than they think. They think you just show up at 7 o'clock game, you show up at 5:30, set some cameras up, you're ready to roll. You need to be prepared. You need to, there's a day, 2 days, 3, whatever it is. For a different show, it might be a different amount of time that you need prepared, but that's what I'm trying to stress to my administration as well, as the amount of preparation it takes to get ready for all of these shows.
Hey, Chad, thanks. That segues nicely into my often my little stump speech about scheduling, and planning. As you're doing this, there's nothing, infrastructure and equipment choices, all of those things are great, but also always try to keep in mind scheduling and process with your administration. Far too often today, projects are approved at the 11th hour, and Herculean things are expected to happen and take place that leave little or no time for you as a production staff to prepare and do things, right? And so we can adjust staff and do a bunch of different things and usually make rooms come together very, very quickly. But then when that first event happens and it's just chaos and a disaster, and your administrator comes and says, why did I spend $3 million for that to look like that? And you can say, well, when I told you that process was going to take a year and you gave me 3.5 months, that's usually kind of a typical answer, but that's not an answer that somebody wants to hear when they just spent $3.5 million. So these projects are more and more complex today. They do have set amount of time that is needed to create them and to build these rooms and build these facilities and adequately train and give you the amount of time to get those reps and get everything that you want for both sides of the house, both broadcast and in-venue entertainment set. So the more lead time that you give yourself and give us as system integrators, the better end result you're going to have for your administration and for your fans.
You know, we went as so far as when our new control room was built last summer, you know, we talked to our 2 basketball coaches, and they actually let us do a full setup for 2 close scrimmages they had. And we weren't going to record anything, we weren't going to show it to everybody, but it was a chance for us to practice with the room in a game situation. And I think at the end of the day, when opening night came and we actually, everything, the lights on were on for real, that helped us tremendously.
As we wrap up, I want to finish up with Andy real fast. What Andy has designed at Georgia Tech and how he skins his cat is amazing to us up here. He's got a great workflow. But he's got a little YouTube video that he has produced. I just want to give him a chance to just talk about it a little fast, real quick, and then I think we're finished.
Yeah, I mean, as we started discussing this on our conference call, I thought, you know, what better way to showcase or kind of give a visual representation of how we do what we do is to take a side-by-side, you know, the left side of the screen is the Jumbotron feed and the right side is our ESPN3 broadcast. So I made that into a YouTube link, a full game from start to finish with mistakes. Nothing edited as it happened. I didn't get a chance to put that on a slide to bring it up here, but you can feel free to email me. It's my first initial, last name, Blanton @gatech.edu. And I will shoot back an email to you with the list of crew that is used to produce that. And it's a women's basketball game against Virginia Tech on ESPN3. So it's a good representation to see how we kind of do our dance of going in and out of breaks, halftime. You know, you see the gymnastics team who comes out, the youth gymnastics team come out on the court, set up, do their routine, and meanwhile, our town is talking about first half highlights. So it's, you know, that and going in and out of timeouts and how we, you know, walk to a huddle and then start to see elements, dance cams, things like that on the Jumbotron. So
on one switcher with one TD.
One switcher.
On one channel of comm.
One TD.
I'll tell you what, if you have a $250,000 control room or a $10 million control room, download that video and look at it because what they're doing is amazing. It's incredible.
Our control room budget was just shy of $250,000. So the cameras and the equipment list is also on that email I'll shoot back to you to let you know what equipment we're using as well. Blanton @gatech, that's TECH.edu.
Is that it? Okay, yes.
This actually is for Andy too, because I think just learning and hearing for the first time what you guys are doing is really impressive. Is this how you foresee you guys, is this your long-term plan? Is it a short-term plan? What do you see happening for you guys in the next couple of years?
I think everything is always evolving. You know, I would love for the day to walk into my AD's office and say, hey man, you know, everybody else is spending $2 or $3 million. You think we can do that? And him go, yes, sure. But I don't see that happening in the near future. I mean, I hope that there's going to be some pen to paper real soon to announce a certain network that we all feel like might be coming down the pipe for the ACC. But we don't know that for sure. You know, there are advantages and disadvantages of separating those two units. You know, like the question of how do you keep one director telling the same group of people how to do what they do. And, you know, I've always been able to try to troubleshoot questions, find answers in very unconventional methods. I mean, we do our remote broadcasts over one strand of fiber where everybody else is running big trunks of fiber, so we do everything out of the basketball arena the same way over one strand. So, you know, that's an unconventional method that we've also used. But I would love to have 2 control rooms, 3 control rooms, 4 control rooms. I'll take it. You know, I've joked with my own admins of if you gave me $3 million, I'm not sure I could figure out how to spend it. I'm sure these guys on the ends would help me figure it out. But, you know, I've always tried to find the lesser way and maximize the ability to do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.